Good morning. Welcome back to the lecture series on ethical aspects of research. This is the fourth lecture in the series, and in this lecture we are going to cover about the publication ethics. Our learning objectives would be to know about ethics in publishing, common ethics related malpractices in publication, and their consequences. So what are the publication ethics? Publication ethics are primarily the principles abiding the researcher to the practice of integrity, honesty, responsibility, and accountability for what he is publishing. This is a very easy depiction of what it really mean to be a follower of a publication ethics. So stealing someone else's idea is the breach of the publication ethics. Publication is the outcome of observing perseverance in research. You see that research is a very hard activity, very cumbersome activity, and publishing the research is even more cumbersome, more difficult. So research to publication is one longest and hardest journey a researcher ever takes. There can be tempting propositions during the journey, offering us a researcher for shortcuts to reach the goal quickly. But be warned, every researcher is required to be warned about that these shortcuts are bound to take you to the troubles and consequences which may not be in your immediate sight. So you can land up in difficulties if you follow these kind of shortcuts to reach your goal quickly. So while talking about publication ethics, our intention is to choose the right path to succeed, because it is being told many times that success is important. Although the success is important, even more important is how it is achieved. So knowing about publication ethics is going to help us sticking to the right path to achieve success in the form of a publication. This is a publication ethics checklist. Publication ethics basically involves many things, many of the things, comprising of approval and consent, data accuracy, falsification, fabrication, and lot many others. We are going to take them one by one, and we are going to discuss about them one by one. So to begin with, the first point of the publication ethics is approval and consent. Is your research has been approved properly by the authorities? Did you get approval from the Institutional Ethics Committee? If yes, do you know the statutory status of the Ethics Committee which has passed your proposal? Is this Ethics Committee affiliated with DCGI or any other monitoring agency in the field? Have your research proposal got approval with or registered with the CTRI? And have you done a sort of prospective registration of patients after the CTRI registration was done? What about informed consent? Have you really taken the informed consent? And this informed consent format of the informed consent was approved by the Ethics Committee. And have you taken the audio-visual recording of the informed consent process in case if it is a sponsored product evaluation? Your research involves a product which is a sponsored product, and you are willing to evaluate their effectiveness or responsiveness of that product. So this comprises the proper approval and consent process. So every researcher, once the research is completed or terminated, is required to keep all the records till 5 years. When you submit it for the publication in a journal may ask you to submit their proofs anytime. If you say that yes, my research got approved from the Institutional Ethics Committee, at any point of time the journal editor may ask you to show the proof that it got approved. Similarly for the CTRI registration, or similarly for the informed consent. So keep all the records at least for 5 years from the point your research is completed. Now, the second important point comes to be the research fraud. Okay, what is this research fraud? Research fraud comprises of data fabrication and data falsification. What is data fabrication is? Data fabrication pertains to the publication of results and conclusions from data that are not generated by the study. I mean, this is not the data, this is not the result and conclusion which has been generated by your own study, but you are fabricating these results and fabricating the conclusion by putting the data from somewhere else. So this would comprise, or this would implicate, the data fabrication. What is data falsification? Data falsification is primarily the manipulation of the data. Manipulation of data means the data, you are manipulating the data to get the favorable outcome, to get the favorable results as you might have hypothesized in the beginning. If your data is not supportive to that, what you do? You try to make a kind of falsification of the data so that the favorable outcomes can be arrived. Similarly, for lot many studies which require imaging, many times it happens that with the help of the image editors or Photoshop, what you do? You modify in the images to conceal the truth and to give something which was not basically generated from the research process. So what happens if you do this kind of research fraud? What happens? And any experienced reviewer and editor may smell very easily the research fraud by looking at the data which you are producing, by looking at the statistics, tables, p-values, 95% confidence interval, odds ratio. I mean, whatever you are putting inside your research paper, a sensible reviewer and editor may easily find that what is wrong with that data. So this fabrication and falsification are extremely serious research misconducts. If editor or reviewer are suspicious at any time of review process, they will be asking the author to disclose the raw data sheet to confirm or alleviate the suspicion. So be aware that any point of time, if you are submitting your research paper to a journal, your raw data sheet can also be asked to be shown to the journal editor. So that is also something very important. Editor may request for the data sheet even after a few years of publication if sufficient doubt is raised by somebody else. So that simply says that even if your paper is published, it's not going to be completely safe, that your fabrication is not going to be traced anymore. At any point of time, if somebody raises a question against the data which is being included in your research paper, the editor at any point of time can call you or can ask you to put the data sheets, the raw data sheets, for their further screening. So all the data from the clinical study therefore should be preserved for a reasonably long period. Now, a very, very important aspect related to the publication ethics is plagiarism. What is plagiarism? This is defined as the use of previously published work of another author in one's own manuscript without their consent, credit or acknowledgement, without acknowledging them, without giving credit to them, without consenting from them, without citing them, and fraudulently claiming it as one's own work. This is referred as plagiarism. And this is one of the most common scientific misconduct in manuscript writing. Because this is something very easy. I mean, something is written somewhere. What you do, you simply make a copy of that and you just paste it in your manuscript. So this is a copy and paste practice, which is also called as plagiarism. There are many types of plagiarism, many kind of plagiarism. The two types of plagiarism are identified commonly depending on the extent of the content reproduced. One is the clear plagiarism, which comprises of copy of large portions of text and or data and presenting it as of one's own. And second could be the minor plagiarism, which comprises of copy of short phrases without any misattribution of the data. Clear plagiarism could be of many types. For example, it could be literal copying, word to word, copying of large part of a previous manuscript. It could be substantial copying, reproducing major part of a previous research paper such as text, table and figures. It could be paraphrasing, that means the copying the idea from a previous paper without copying verbatim and text and paraphrasing it in your own words. Recycling, it is also called as self-plagiarism, when an author uses the same text in multiple papers without citation of the prior work. I mean, maybe your own paper, but you are citing it repeatedly without changing anymore in multiple papers. So that comprises recycling or self-plagiarism. How the journal deals with the plagiarism. This is also something important to be understood. Usually all the journals deal with plagiarism by means of plagiarism checking tools to identify proportion of the plagiarism. They try to identify the extent of the plagiarism. There are COPE policy. COPE is Committee of Publication Ethics, an international body which deals with the publication ethics. So there are COPE policies to be followed if it is detected. During the review phase, if it is detected that this submission has substantial amount of plagiarism, the author would be warned and blacklisted possibly. And if it is published somehow, if it is published without being checked properly for the amount of the plagiarism which was done there in the paper, it would amount for the retraction of the article, warning to be issued to the author, and communication of this misconduct made available in the public domain, and the author may possibly be blacklisted. University Grant Commission has a punitive policy to deal with plagiarism in terms of its intensity, frequency and level of the researcher. That means UGC deals differently if this plagiarism is done by a student or by a teaching faculty. Teaching faculty, if doing plagiarism, is supposed to deal with more strong punitive policies. Another issue which is there in the publication ethics is simultaneous submission. Simultaneous submission means you are submitting the same paper at many places in aspect of multiplying the possibility of its publication. So this is submitting a manuscript to more than one scientific journal at the same time, and it is done in order to increase the chances of publication when the author is not sure about its publication at first place. So you try to increase the chances of its publication when you feel that the first submission may not have a strong possibility of getting it published. So this is a simultaneous submission. Simultaneous submission creates a cumbersome situation when the same article is published at more than one place. It happens sometimes. To prevent this, journals obtain a declaration from the authors that the manuscript is not being considered for publication by any other scientific journal. The authors are advised to submit to one journal and wait for a decision before submitting to another journal. Submitting or presenting a paper for a scientific conference does not preclude authors from submitting the same paper for publication to a peer-reviewed journal. That means if you are presenting a paper in a scientific conference, this do not restrict you to publish the same paper in a scientific peer-reviewed journal. The next comes the duplicate and salami publications. Duplicate publication, it is using the same data, hypothesis and observation to produce another paper with different title and author order. You are producing or you are utilizing the same data which has been utilized to produce one paper earlier, and you are utilizing the same data and same hypothesis or same discussion which has been used to produce one paper to produce another paper, but you are smart enough that you have changed the title and you have changed the author order. So this is the duplicate publication, because it is utilizing the same kind of material which has already been used in producing early paper. So this is duplicate publication. What is salami publication? Salami publication is utilizing the data which is being produced in one research and slicing it in multiple sections so that multiple research papers can be produced by this section of the data. So this implies that the data which is generated as a consequence of one research is being sliced into so many different sections of the data, and every section of data is now utilized to produce a different research paper. So this is called salami publication, and this is not also a very welcoming practice in the scientific publication. Next comes the self-citation. Citing one's own published work in subsequent papers that are out of context to the research being reported is referred to as self-citation. For experienced researchers, the number of times a paper is cited sometimes matters more than actually publishing it. In addition, total number of citations are used to calculate metrics such as G and H index, which may be considered for academic promotions, thus driving senior authors to pursue self-citation. This is perceived as unethical by most of the scientific community and looked down upon the peers. However, sometimes authors may have published a large amount of literature to their niche area, and the subsequent paper is a continuation of previous papers, making self-citations inevitable. However, authors should not introduce concepts outside the scope of the current paper to cite one's own work. The onus remains on the author to guard against such scientific conduct. There can be two kinds of citations, self and obligatory citation. Self-citation is, this is the poor scientist struggling to have the citations, because citation is one very important criteria of assessing the importance of a published research work among peers. So many times the scientists beg for the citations. So that way citation is very important, and if we see that if others are not citing our paper, what we start doing citing our own papers. So this implies the self-citation. There can be another category of the citation, that is obligatory citation. Obligatory citation is this: when you are trying to oblige somebody by citing their papers. For example, you are obliging your supervisor to cite their papers, or you are trying to oblige the editor of the journal where you are intending your paper to get published. So you are citing many papers from that journal in order to oblige the editor of that journal. So this would be obligatory citation. Next comes the authorship ethics. There are many conflicts of authorship, many confusions about the authorship. Who can be listed in a research paper as an author, who cannot be listed as an author in a research paper. So this International Committee of Medical Journal Editors has defined a very crystallized criteria to identify or to clearly say that who can be listed in a research paper as an author. So this ICMJE has defined or has included 4 criteria which are collectively required to be complied by all the authors which are listed in a research paper. So all persons designated as authors should qualify for authorship, and all those who qualify should be listed. This is the clear judgment of the ICMJE. So ICMJE describes 4 basic criteria that must be collectively met to be credited with the authorship, and these all 4 points are to be met by everyone listed as author. What are these 4 points? Number 1 is the substantial contribution to the conduct of a study, including its conception and design, data acquisition, statistical analysis and interpretation. Every author should have done this thing if they are to be enlisted in a research paper as an author. The second is they should have contributed in drafting or revising the article for intellectual contents. They should also have contributed in approval of the final version of the manuscript. And finally, there should be an agreement to be accountable for all aspects of the work in ensuring that questions related to the accuracy or integrity of any part of the work are appropriately investigated and resolved. So these four are the authorship criteria which have been identified by International Committee of the Medical Journal Editors. So these all four criteria are to be complied by every author which is listed in the research paper. So what are the authorship misconducts? There are a number of authorship misconducts. The most commonly seen authorship misconduct in the European countries and in America or in developing countries is ghost authorship. Ghost authorship is the paid authorship. I mean, these are the professional people which are hired to write a manuscript. They are paid people. They are professionals. So these are the people who have contributed substantially in the development of the paper but are not given authorship or acknowledgement in the published paper. They are usually contractual people and paid authors and should, but honestly they should be acknowledged if they are not being given the authorship. The second is the gift authorship. Gift authorship refers to the inclusion in the list of co-authors simply due to an affiliation to an institute where the research was conducted. One typical example is including your supervisor or your guide as a co-author in your paper, or including the director of the institute or including the principal of the college as the co-author of your paper. So this is a gift authorship. Gift authorship is typically provided to heads of institutions or departments even without significant contribution to a particular study. This is simply to mobilize the people who are at the higher positions. And third is the guest authorship. Guest authorship is the authorship which is usually provided to the individuals whose presence as a co-author significantly improves the chances of acceptance of the manuscript. In this kind of authorship, we invite the people who, although not have contributed significantly in the preparation of the manuscript or in the process of the research, we invite them to be in the author list because we feel that their presence in the author list will increase the chances of the publication of the research in a particular journal. So these three are comprising the authorship misconduct. Anyone in the author list, if not meeting the ICMJE criteria, author criteria, accounts to be a kind of authorship misconduct. Now comes the conflict of interest. This is also a very, very common concept. Unfortunately, this is very much misunderstood by a lot of researchers, especially in the Indian research scenario. What the conflict of interest is? Conflict of interest is also known as competing interest, and it is defined as financial, personal, social, or any other interest that directly or indirectly influences the conduct of the author with respect to the particular manuscript. If we have any kind of competing interest or conflict of interest in terms of finances, in terms of personal or social, there are possibilities that we would be manipulating the data or we would be biased towards the results which are being derived from the analysis of the data. So because of this reason, the conflict of interest is required to be declared clearly before the paper is published. So having competing interest is not considered unethical, but the important is that this competing interest has to be declared clearly before the paper is published. This declaration allows the readers to have a liberty to read the paper within the perspective of that conflict of interest declaration. If we say that we have some financial conflict of interest or we have some personal conflict of interest, the reader has a liberty to read the paper in the purview of that declaration of the conflict of interest which is being given by the author. So what could be the consequences of the misconduct? There are clear guidelines and steps by COPE and UGC for each of these misconducts. The first step taken by the editorial board is contacting author and informing them that their misconduct has been identified. If the authors acknowledge and accept their fault, the paper is rejected and the leadership in the author's institution is going to be informed. If the paper is already published, what is going to be done? Authors are provided with an opportunity of self-confession in the form of an erratum in the journal. If the misconduct is major, the editor has the right to revoke the paper after due diligence is performed and misconduct is confirmed. The authors can be blacklisted by the journal and the information is shared with COPE so that all member journals can be informed about the misconduct of the author. If authors deny any misconduct, editor can take cognizance and appropriate action can be taken as per the COPE guidelines. In addition, author can be questioned by the ethics committee of local bodies and suitable punishment can be handed out as per the standard operating procedures. So this was about the publication ethics. I hope that you have enjoyed this series of the lectures on ethics related to the research process. Thank you. Thank you very much.